Welcome to the One Question Leadership Podcast. This is Devin Crosby of Lynn University. Leadership is a dynamic occupation that requires vision, excellence, but most importantly, the humility to serve your people on a daily basis. As you lead, make sure to become grounded in something greater than yourself. This will shape your decisions, provide clarity to your team, and cultivate trust. And trust is the foundation of success. Enjoy the podcast.
Greetings, this is Ty Brown and welcome to the One Question Leadership Podcast, where we highlight executive and organizational leadership. Be sure to follow us on Twitter and Instagram at 1Q Leadership. Also, you can subscribe, rate, and review us wherever you listen to podcasts. Our guest today is Ashwin Puri. Ashwin is the Senior Associate Athletics Director and Chief Athletics Operating Officer at Villanova. Greetings, Ashwin. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Ty.
I'm excited to have you on. You've been in this position at Villanova for almost 2 years. In your past, you worked in strategy and business for the Oakland Athletics, minor league baseball, New Jersey Nets, the NBA league office for a couple stints, the New York Jets. You also spent time with Cal Berkeley, so you have a wealth of experience. And most of that experience is kind of working in external affairs, whether it be ticket sales, suites, sponsorships, those types of things, with a little over 20 years in the sports industry. So I think you can give us some good insight here. Thinking about college athletics, right? We are nonprofits competing against other nonprofits for wins. And the comprehensive makeup of all the elements that go into acquiring those wins is also a competition, right? I get this from Kevin Blue, who was the AD at UC Davis. And he talks a little bit about the difference between professional and college is nonprofits going against other nonprofits, and somebody has to win, somebody has to lose. And then the money you get, you got to reinvest. So thinking about the difference and the similarities when you talk about those type of competition where we're competing for recruits and coaches and administrative personnel, talk to us a little bit about that whole dynamic.
Absolutely, Ty. So it's an interesting point. I've thought a lot about that lately based on, your invite to join this podcast and some of the differences you highlighted, but I think I'll start there, right? You have in the pros, you are purely focused on a win or a loss. Did you make money or did you lose money? Depending on if you're on the personnel side or the business side. So it's very clearly, it's like a binary success or not success. In college, it is important to win, and winning oftentimes enhances or makes it easier for the athletic department to achieve a lot of its goals, right? Financially and otherwise. But ultimately, the core mission across the board is the same, right? You got to graduate your student athletes. You want to give them life-changing experiences while they're on campus. You want them to be able to, take on the world when they leave, right? So what I found is, at least for me, that sort of difference, right? The connection to the mission, the mentorship, the getting up every day with a purpose, for me, is what fills me up and why I prefer, college athletics, right? That said, I think there's so many transferable skills, especially, you alluded to a lot of my experiences on the external side, whether it's selling or fundraising, allocating resources, generating resources, however you refer to that. That all starts with relationships, right? Whether you're selling a ticket for the Jets or the Nets, or I was selling a ticket or a club seat at Cal, the process is oftentimes the same. Now, how you sell and the story you tell might be a little bit different, right? At Cal and at Villanova, I'm able to talk about the impact those dollars make towards our mission and connect, someone with an actual tangible result based on their dollars. Whereas, in the pros, it's less about that and more about I have this seat for these experiences. Would you like it? And I can give you a great package and we can make you feel great about yourself and give you some wonderful benefits and features. But ultimately, you are buying that seat to go to that game for the reason you're buying it, right? It could be client entertainment or something else. Whereas college, I feel like really the pitch is a little bit different because of the impact every dollar makes. So I think there's some differences there. You talked about the investment in the arms race, so to speak. And I've read some of Dr. Blue's work. Kevin is actually a friend of mine. He was at Stanford while I was at Cal before he went to UC Davis. So we've kept in contact over the years. And the arms race is tough. In the pros, you are investing to win, period. In college athletics, you're investing to win, but you also have to keep in mind the core mission. So your investments have to have justification around that. Now, you could argue based on some investments whether they do or not, but nonetheless, the purity of college athletics to me is still there, and that's again the major difference.
Right. Yeah. What's interesting in what you said is, I mean, in both cases, you are selling an experience, right, in terms of the pros and in terms of college. But when you talk about what you're selling, when you talk about the college experiences, your dollar has a lot more meaning, right, than just sitting at the game and enjoying a competition. Your dollar has more meaning because it impacts more than just the bottom line of an organization. I thought that was pretty astute.
Yeah, and it took me a minute. When I first got to Cal, Sandy Barber and Solly Fulp hired me to run and create like a ticket sales organization at Cal, which they had not had prior. We were one of the first universities to bring it in house, and it took me a while for that to click, right? Like, because I approached it, I think initially like a pro sports team would, and again, there's a lot of transferability and similarities, but it's a little more nuanced. And I think I over the several months of my first year of employment, I sort of absorbed that, witnessed that, I saw it, and I made the connection myself, which then changed, I think, our overall philosophy and how we tried to sell or fundraise depending on what we were doing at the time. So 100% agree. And again, it's what attracts me to this industry, the college sports industry, because we are making a bigger impact than making $1 or losing $1 and winning a game or losing a game.
Yeah, that's interesting. At that time at Cal Berkeley, like you can actually remember a shift in mindset, meaning like, I approached this strictly bottom line initially because of my background, but I see that this is much bigger than just the bottom line. You actually can remember that point in your life at Berkeley?
Oh, yeah. And like I said, it was in my first several months. I think at first, too, a lot of people would talk to me about, hey, this isn't just about, selling a ticket to California Memorial Stadium or going to a game. This is bigger. And I thought at first, yeah, sure it is. But like ultimately selling a ticket. We had really strong success coming back into the stadium. But I think the more I talked to people, the more practices I attended, the more I got to know the student athletes, the more I talked to the fundraising team. We had sort of a joint effort, right? We were a lot of our club seat holders were big donors, so we had to sort of handle them, a certain way. The more I learned about the industry, I quickly realized, that there was that nuanced difference. And again, like I said, my skills were completely transferable, but I had to adjust and alter the way we pitched, the way we talked about things. And, I've slowly gained a much greater appreciation for all that over the, 8 years or so I've spent in college athletics now.
I'm sure that Sandy Barber and the rest of the leadership were probably pretty happy when that switch happened, right? They're like, okay, we got somebody who's an asset here, but let's give him a little time to really understand what he's gotten himself into in terms of college athletics. So that was probably pretty exciting for him to see that switch. What I wonder about your experience and the thought process in terms of business and operations in your current role at Villanova. And I think you've touched on some of it here, but you're at Villanova, you guys are successful in basketball. Football had some success a couple years ago, and you're working with a pretty dynamic athletics director there in terms of Mark Jackson. I wonder about just your process of the things you do in business and operations there at Villanova and what you bring to the table with your number of experiences you have.
Yeah, it's funny when some college athletic directors, or leaders in the college athletics industry don't necessarily look to the pros or appreciate pro experience as much as others. And I think it depends on, the type of leader they are or whatever. Mark actually has pro sports experience, which was cool. So he appreciated my background. So I think that was helpful, when he brought me on board. And again, you alluded to it. He is one of the most dynamic leaders I've ever worked for. It's our relationship spectacular. The way he includes me and communicates across the board and just leads our department, tackling not only the business and our core mission, but also, some of the major events that have happened over the last couple of years since I've been here. Like he just, the relationships he has with our kids and student athletes is phenomenal. So it's also great to watch him work, right? To watch him work, to watch a guy like Jay Wright work, to watch our other coaches work. I can truly say, Villanova has seen the benefit, right, of investing in men's basketball, the return from a brand perspective that has impacted the entire university. What comprehensive excellence can do, not only to the Grand University, but then how it permeates into every aspect of the athletic department, right? In every program, whether they have the budgets and resources other programs do or not, they still soak it up, and they see greatness. They mimic it, they feel it, they make them more confident. So it's pretty remarkable. But as far as business practices go, like I said, I think a lot of the skills and how you manage a business is transferable and very similar to pro sports, right? A budget is a budget. How we allocate funds or how we account for things is very similar across the board. Now, you layer in fundraising versus business revenue, and there's some nuance in how you track and account and how you have to deliver back sort of a report to a donor, based on the intentions of their gift, which is a little different, but nonetheless, like the principles are generally the same across the board. But it's been nice. My two stops in college, again, working for Sandy and now Mark, both appreciated my background in pro sports, what I brought to the table. And again, we're very smart and astute business people themselves. So it's been pretty seamless, if you will.
I imagine it has. You touched on one thing there that I'd like to follow up on is the aspect of fundraising. I imagine your exposure to that at Cal and then your exposure to it now at Villanova, while there are similarity to sales, you are trying to get somebody to invest in something bigger than their own personal satisfaction, I guess, in some way, right? I wonder about your transition to understanding fundraising and being involved with fundraising in these two stints here in college athletics.
Yeah, sure. It's funny. In sales, oftentimes you'll work with sales trainers. I was one myself at one point in time, and much of the process is the same. However, oftentimes when you're in sales, sales trainers and folks will talk about a close. How do you close them? How do you ask for the sale? And I think that's where the real difference is, right? Ultimately, like when you're fundraising or you're selling, you're building rapport, you're building a relationship, you're uncovering sort of the likes, the dislikes, the motivations of either the buyer or the person potentially that's going to give a gift, right? And so understanding who they are, what their interests are, and trying to connect the dots with a need, either on the fundraising side, a need or a program that could be enhanced with their gift, or on the pro side, trying to solve the problem or give them something that they've clearly articulated they might want or find pleasure in, right? But ultimately, like there's no close in fundraising. You sort of present opportunities, and ultimately, like the donor has got to want to do it. Because there's so much like value. If the person who does want to give, they've got to feel it inside. They've got to feel a connection. They've got to feel good about it. And of course, there's quid pro quo gifts, right? Like a sale, whether you give the person a certain type of benefit or recognition or whatever. But ultimately, you can only go so far when you're fundraising. It hard closes, like maybe some people in sales preach. Just it's not the same. So how you ask for it is a little bit different, but I think how you approach it ultimately very similar, right? It's just uncovering a need, it's making a connection to the product. So again, just like my transformation, how we sold tickets, I think the same thing. I realized that my skills were transferable from a fundraising perspective, and I'd find success if I thought about it the same way, but built in sort of the understanding that there's some different steps, probably closer to the end than a corporate sale or a ticket sale.
All right. You don't want to hard close them, right? Do you want to get it or you don't want to get it? That's not something you want to do in fundraising. Right. Yeah, it's super interesting. One thing I've thought about, and when I talk to people who are in operations and in working external, is the interaction with student athletes. It just sounds like you have so much on your plate, right? In terms of making sure businesses run well, making sure there's revenue coming in, making sure you are satisfying the various constituents who have a vested interest in the department and the school overall. I guess the same question goes to athletic directors. It's like, have you and how do you find time to possibly interact with student athletes? You mentioned Cal going to practices. Do you do any of that there at Villanova?
Oh, yeah. So I get to work with the men's basketball program, on scheduling, on budget, on program administration. I also oversee men's lacrosse and men's soccer. So I spend a lot of time visiting practice, talking to the student athletes, talking to the coaching staff in all three of those programs, just about anything. It could be what we had for breakfast to what classes the student athletes are taking, how they're doing in those classes, what's going on in their personal lives, if they want to share those types of things. But what I try to do is just build authentic, meaningful relationships with everybody. And what I've come to find is, for me anyway, that's the best part of the job, right? Relationships, build strong relationships across campus in the athletic department with our student athletes. That way, again, I hate to sound repetitive and maybe a little cheesy for some people, but like
right.
Connecting to the mission here is why we do what we do, and it makes it fun. And especially when the mission is our kids, right? Our student athletes.
Yeah.
I don't mind hanging out with young people because it makes me feel a little younger than I am.
Yeah, right. It keeps your mind fresh, right? That's funny.
But it's a lot of fun. We do spend time in practices. Mark encourages that, especially as a sports administrator. He expects that. He expects us to know what's going on. He expects us to know like positives, negatives, challenges our kids are facing. What's going on with the coaches, how they're thinking about sort of the program strategically and tactically. I don't get involved in game planning or anything, but I do understand what's going on in and around the program every day. And that takes a lot of attention, a lot of relationships. And again, it's the best part of my job, to be quite honest with you. I absolutely love it.
Of course, you mentioned Mark has professional experience. And of course, we've talked about your professional experience. Are there times when you and him are collaborating on things when, you might have to take that approach of, that bottom line approach when you want to move the department forward on aspects regarding revenue generation?
Yeah, look, I think we both appreciate accountability. We both appreciate that bottom line mindset. I think you have to when you're running a business, regardless of it's a nonprofit in higher education or if it's a for-profit private company. But I think ultimately, and that's a part of the culture you build every day. It shouldn't be a surprise to people when you're having tough conversations about accountability, about results, about performance, because that's what that really is, right? And I think pro sports, it's very apparent. There's no like soft side of pro sports. You either achieve success or you don't, and if you don't, you're not going to be around for long. And I think that same idea is in college athletics. You just maybe talk about it a little bit differently, but ultimately the accountability is the same. The culture supporting accountability. You may talk about it a little bit differently. You may present things a little bit differently, but everything we do is about results. And our results in college might be a little bit different than the results expected in pros, like I said, because it's a broader mission. But nonetheless, it's very similar principles.
Right. Still a business. You still got the difference is there is actually a purpose and a mission in terms of college athletics, but you still got to focus on bringing in more money than you spend, trying your best to do that kind of thing. That's very interesting. This last question here I ask is, what I know about Mark and the couple of times I've interviewed him is he is a big time introspective, self-reflection time type person. And that is what he preaches. Now you get somebody to have somebody who can authenticate that, right? In terms of that works for him. Is that something that he preaches? You see in the culture of the university, that self-reflection time to make sure you are who you say you are and to make sure you're doing the things necessary to bring your best self to the organization.
100%, right? Now he doesn't. What's great about Mark is, he oftentimes will just chat with me after a meeting or something and say, hey, how did that go? How do you think we did, or how do you think we presented things? So I love that. I love the constant sort of absorbing, learning, taking feedback to get better, all the guys to get better. But he doesn't like force his process on anyone else. I think what he wants is for people to do it in their own way. But he encourages it all the time. I mean, he's an amazing guy to work for. And I'll use the term friendship. And sometimes people use that term a little too lightly, but like, I feel like Mark and I have become friends. Yes, there's a time where he has to hold me accountable and have a conversation with me about, did we do things the right way? Did we not? Whatever, right? Like those things always happen. But we built a really true, authentic relationship. And I think that's what he does. Whether it's with donors, the president, our president, Father Peter Donahue, whether it's with our SWA and my counterpart Lynn, or Father Rob, like Mark has built really authentic, awesome relationships because he's such a stand-up guy. He's humble and he believes in team, right? Like team first. It's we. It's all about we and us all the time. So look, he's one of the best guys, best leaders I've worked for. And it's really awesome, again, like I mentioned this earlier, to watch him work. He is relentless. I mean, his schedule is packed. He's hanging out with donors. He's presenting to the board of directors. He's working on, just our overall men's basketball strategy with Jay. He's all over everywhere. He attends countless events every year. I mean, it's exhausting watching him work, but again, it's really speaks to who he is. Just an amazing guy.
Yeah, I've enjoyed the times that I've gotten to speak with him about his process of self-reflection and taking the time to understand who he is. This has been an excellent conversation, Ashwin. I really appreciate you joining us here on the One Question Leadership Podcast.
It's been a blast, Ty. Thanks for having me.
That was Ashwin Puri. He is the Senior Associate Athletics Director and Chief Athletics Operating Officer at Villanova. And of course, this is Ty Brown with One Question. And keep in mind, the role of a leader is to create and maintain an environment that people want to be a part of. And as always, be better tomorrow than you are today. This episode of the One Question Leadership Podcast is produced by Spades Media Group, solving problems using creative leadership.